VoiceAmerica.com.
All right, good afternoon. It is 3 minutes after 1 o'clock on this very day, the 8th day of March in the Lord's year 2021. I'm J. Michael McCoy, and welcome to the Monday edition of Mac's World Live, living free through forgiveness. Everything is up and running and ready to go. Your opinion's always important to me. You can call in at 515-442-5764. That translates to 515-442. See, look, this is how fancy we are here. KPOG. Get it? 5764 is, oh no, you got a cell phone. It doesn't work that way anymore, does it? In the old days, every letter had a number on it. And yes, we had party lines. And I walked uphill to and from school with warm potatoes in my socks to keep my feet. You're not buying this, are you? All right, that's fine. My special guest today is Dennis Barrett. Dennis is what I would consider a healthcare specialist. Spent his all of your working days, or just a few
at the VA.
Yeah,
28 years at the VA. I had 13 years in laboratory medicine before that.
All right, so laboratory medicine, viruses, vaccines, the whole nine yards. Can I just be honest with you for a minute? I'm a little overdone with the talking heads. I'm a little overdone with the people on television whose job it is to get ratings. Now, understand that doesn't work for radio anymore. So ratings don't matter in radio anymore. They stopped mattering, 8, 9 years ago. In television, they're a big deal. And we've got a line drawn down the middle in this country about no masks. The community's open, it's closed. Restaurants, social distancing. And now the big one is, of course, do you take the vaccine? And so I thought, well, I don't know much about this. I know, you're surprised. You think I know a little bit about everything, but I don't. But I do know where to find the experts. And Dennis is with us today to talk about that. All right, Dennis. First of all, let's talk to me like I'm a 6-year-old, okay? So what is coronavirus or Corona-19 or COVID-19? What is that?
Well, it's a disease that's infectious. If I was talking to a 6-year-old, I would say it's like a bug that can get inside your body and make you sick.
And so, that's how I want you to talk to me, like I'm a 6-year-old. So compare it to other bugs that gets inside of us and makes us sick that we're aware of today.
Well, there are viruses, there are bacteria, there are parasites. Parasites are pretty complex and they're rather large.
You mean large in size?
Yeah, okay. Compared to bacteria.
Okay.
And bacteria will be smaller, often single-celled animals. And a virus, though, isn't even alive. It's a strand of DNA. It has the...
Wait a minute, hold on. It has its own DNA?
It has a strand of DNA, right.
And it's different, like ours is all different.
Right.
So, okay, I didn't know that. So there is a DNA for the virus, and it is unlike anything else.
Right, it would be specific to itself. They're also pretty prone to mutate. So this particular virus is already mutated into other forms. So its DNA has changed. It changes its DNA to fit its environment over time.
Okay, so you lost me on something. You said that it has different strains. Is that the term you used?
Well, right. There are different. So we are seeing that this is mutating already. In Europe, they're dealing with some of those mutations even as we speak. There's one in Britain that has changed. There's one in South Africa that's changed. And those are concerning to people who fight this disease on any level.
All right, so mutated. What? Give me tell me what that means. I mean, when I grew up, my kids watch the mutant teenage turtles or whatever they were, but we're not talking about that.
It's like code. The DNA, I think, would be best compared to computer code today. And we
Okay.
use the word viruses in computers because
Yeah.
they are very similar in the fact that that DNA strand is a code and its relation to all the other amino acids in that strand give it its characteristics. And so just like a computer code, if you get some of that code changed, twisted, then it doesn't function the same way it did.
Okay, you used the term amino acids. I don't know what that is. I know what battery acid is.
If you break protein down, it breaks into various amino acids. So that's
Okay.
kind of like the molecular building blocks for protein.
Okay. And protein's good
Yeah. It's in every cell of your body.
until it gets infected with a virus.
Well, you have your own DNA, and that's what's happening is this virus infects you. It gets into your cell, and then it starts replicating its DNA and spreading that out to the rest of your body.
Okay.
And then it'll take it over. So think of a video game where everything starts spewing out of this infected cell and starts marching through your video game, tearing up everything, and you're trying to combat it.
Well, the example that I'm dealing with right now, and I'm very, very careful with what I download, even stuff from quote-unquote real, what I call flesh friends, I very rarely download it, but I lost my hard drive a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. It's ruined, and they assume that I got some type of virus. And I know you can get one easily if you're not careful on what you bring in. So how can a human be careful of what they bring in when it comes to this COVID-19?
Well, this particular virus is spread primarily through the air, and it usually comes into our lungs, our bronchus, in through that system. So, we first thought maybe it was all about touching, and there might be 15-20%. Because your hands would have the virus on them. Eventually, you'd get them in your mouth, or you'd pick your nose, and then you would breathe them in.
Well, and we're supposed to be real careful with our eyes.
Any
Orifice.
places it could come in, yeah.
I want to say hi to Darren and Jason today. Remember, when you log on to Facebook, you can not only hear us, but you can see us. Now, I have a face for radio. That's why I have a camera on Dennis. He's a handsome guy. So, but we do invite you to watch us. That's called a webcast. When you have just the audio, it's called a podcast. So we don't do it for anything fancy. We do it to be genuine. We do it so you can see who we are, what we're doing, and how we're doing it. Nothing fancy, just good old-fashioned talk radio with pictures. All right, so where, and maybe you can't answer this, but where does a virus come from? How is it created? Is that a big question?
Yeah, that's a pretty big question. I'm sure there are week-long seminars on how that happens. My background is more bacterial than viral, but we've dealt with these kind of things before, with viruses that would attack us. In the case of coronavirus, in the case of N1H1, in the case of SARS.
N1H1, what'd they call that? The pig flu?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Swine flu.
Swine flu. So that one came from people living close to pigs, and that virus crossed. We all carry viruses. There are human viruses. They just live in our body all the time, and we don't worry about them all that much. The pig virus crossed over and gave us swine flu. This is a bat, apparently a bat.
B-A-T?
Right.
Like Batman?
Right, that flies around in a cave.
Okay.
We think that came out of bats.
When this first came out, and I despise that time in my life. I truly do, because it all stunk like politics. But what we were told was one of the things was it was developed in a laboratory and tested on animals, and then the people in the laboratory, to make extra money, would go out and sell the animals for human consumption. Now, is that just horse hockey?
I was reading this morning. There is still a lot of interest in how this occurred. And if we're going to fight it well, we need to know how it occurred. And if we're going to prevent future similar viruses, we need to know how it occurred. And the Chinese government honestly hasn't been very forthcoming. First, they blamed it on a fish market. There's a lot of evidence that they were working with not only this virus, but other viruses in a laboratory in Wuhan.
Yeah.
We have virology laboratories here, big one in the Atlanta area with CDC. And whether it was for medical purposes or, as some people have suggested, for military purposes, I don't know that the jury's in on that one yet.
I'm glad you brought that up. Will it ever be? I mean, it's just one of those medical things that eventually we can get to backdoor one.
Well, I think they have identified the first patient. They think they have.
Okay.
Partly, but it's difficult because, there's issues with getting data from the Chinese government. We're not exactly next door friends,
Yeah. Did when I think of and I'm not remembering the phrase now, bacterial warfare.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the right term?
Bio warfare.
Biowarfare. Okay. Isn't that what the Syrian people faced with Saddam Hussein and what they called yellow cake?
Well, I think that was more chemical warfare.
Chemical warfare.
Yeah, that
okay.
was more chemicals.
Have we ever been in the midst of a bio warfare that we could go back and say, this is how it happened?
I'm not going to say no, but if we have, I'm not aware of it at this point.
All right. So, this virus has its own DNA. And when it gets into a human, it changes our DNA or it changes its DNA?
Well, it replicates and it begins attacking our cells so that they cannot function and do their business.
Okay.
So this particular, you may have heard about the spike. This particular virus has a physical spike on it. If you put it under electron microscope, you can see that it has an outline of a spike that zeroes into our cells.
That's that ball with all the little stuff on it, right?
Yeah, the spikes are the things sticking out.
Okay.
And so the purpose of the virus, or the purpose of the vaccine, I should say, is, I think all of these vaccines are looking at ways to neutralize that spike.
Sand it down?
Coat it over.
Have
something else that connects with it, so then it cannot connect with our cells. Would be more of a, I think, of a layman's way of understanding it.
Okay, I want to pause for just a second. I don't want to get into the vaccine quite yet. I want to understand more about the virus. Somebody told me that if you look on some ingredients of different things from food to gasoline to pharmaceuticals, you will see Corona. That is a product or an ingredient into a lot of different things. Is that correct?
That's the first time I've heard it. I haven't gone looking.
Not correct. If I'm the first guy you heard it from, but there's no way that's true. All right. How has this thing surprised you? I mean, we're at a year now. My youngest daughter's birthday is March 23rd. And that was the day that I think it was President Trump or somebody, Fauci, who knows, kind of set that we've got this thing now and it's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how to ask this other than just point blank ask it. Have we handled it correctly? Are we fighting this thing?
Well, I think looking back, we know for sure there's ways we could have handled it better. Part of that is the learning curve that we faced when it hit. We knew that there was problems in China. We'd heard about those in the fall and early winter of 2019.
19.
And but we didn't have a lot of information as to how to fight it, what it was doing, what its symptoms were, how to recognize it, and such and such. So we in this country have faced a big learning curve. I think part of the problem, Mac, is that we really have not faced anything like this in most of our lifetimes. I
This
think
kind of virus or this type of response?
This type of response.
Okay.
So we faced there was 2 bird flus, the SARS viruses. There was a MERS, there was a SARS. Both of those came from birds. We faced the swine flu, and we took the measures. Some of them were quarantine type measures. Some of them were just treating symptoms measures. And we were able to control those. We even had Ebola in this country at one point, a few cases. And those poor people were basically just quarantined from everybody. If Ebola had gotten loose then, with our current thinking, we would have been in big, big trouble in this country with the way we've handled this virus. So we haven't really been good about, first of all, we didn't realize that masks would help. We were all focused on, don't touch.
Yeah. Social distancing.
Right, and wash your hands after everything, and that's still okay and good, but it's not the main route that this thing takes to infect us. So certainly, sadly, it became politicalized.
Yeah.
And I think that has created some problems. This is a medical problem. Politicians need to respect the healthcare folks and work with them. We may have overreacted with our initial shutdown. Perhaps if we had said, hey, let's everybody wear masks beforehand, the shutdown wouldn't have needed to be so long. And I'm not sure. I mean, as soon as we opened up, it spiked again. I think November was the worst month for deaths here in Iowa.
Yeah. I have a high school buddy, a friend, a distant friend. I went to high school with him, and we were friends in high school. He went on to get. I don't want to undercover him or put him out. He's got several major degrees, and one of them is a degree in vaccinations, and the other one is a degree in his studies of viruses. And he's really a neat, low-key, kind of reminds me of you. He's low-key, he doesn't get real excited. Doesn't buy into all the politics. I talked to him one day last week, and he says the biggest problem we're going to face is that we're Americans, and we're prideful, and you can't tell us what to do. And as the weather changes and gets warmer, more people are going to be outside. They're going to be boating. They're going to go to concerts. They're going to open up churches again. And everybody's going to act like it's the same thing. Or everybody's going to act like it's okay. Weddings, class reunions, state fairs. And by the time we hit August or September, it'll be worse than it has been than it's ever been with COVID-19.
I would agree. It certainly could be. Now, he's a virologist, and virology is its own little world. And the more we listen to these people with those kind of backgrounds, the better off we're going to be. Any place where humans congregate together, this thing can hit. And one of the big problems with COVID, as opposed to, say, SARS, so you weren't infectious with SARS until you felt bad. Well, with COVID, I'm infectious a day or two, at least 24, maybe 48 hours before I ever start feeling a problem.
Okay.
That's a real, that it creeps up on you, and so you can feel fine, go to a party, go to church, go to wherever, and be spreading this to all your friends.
Okay, so let's hit pause there for a moment and tell me what is symptoms the right word? What is it that I'm going to feel?
Well, that's the other piece. This thing is so all over the board that it's hard to understand. My wife and I, our whole family came down, and my daughter, my son-in-law, my grandson, we all lived together. We all contracted this thing in late October and early November. My wife is very ill. She's semi-invalid and had a lot of problems breathing. She has COPD. And this really hit her on the breathing side. For me, it was a headache and fever. Also for my son-in-law, he had a fever for over a week. He just couldn't shake it. But my daughter had gastroenteritis. She had GI symptoms.
Okay.
So to answer your question, it's all over the board. It can be a fever. It can be aches and pains like the flu. It can be breathing problems. It can be GI problems. They're all, it's all there.
I know as a pastor, I go to the hospitals and visit people. And for a long time, I couldn't do that. Now they let me do that, but they take my temperature. And it isn't a thermometer. It's like a ray gun or something like that. Are we talking about 104 degree temperature, or are we just talking about a little bit more than 98.6?
It can be either one. My son-in-law ran 103, 104 for almost a week.
You die from that.
I had a day where I had a really high temperature, and then it dropped down to like 101 or so.
Well, isn't that, I'm going to go back to 8th grade biology. Isn't that the way our body fights off something like the COVID coronavirus? It heats up our bodies.
Right. And so part of that is a metabolic process from your body trying to make its own antibodies, make its own vaccine, so to speak.
Okay.
So it goes into high gear. It's like you revved your engine and your car gets hot. Your engine gets hotter.
Okay.
And that's sort of the way the body responds to this.
Dennis Barrett is my guest today. He is what I would call a health care specialist. Been in healthcare at one point or another for all of his career. And I've known Dennis for a couple of years. And much like my friend at the CDC, you're taking this really seriously. And you took it seriously before it attacked your family.
Yes, I did. We've tried to think how that came into our family. There's a possibility of 3 different ways that it could have happened, but we were trying our best to be cautious. We self-quarantined as much as possible. I'd go to the grocery store and buy groceries and come home, and that was just about the extent. We didn't come to church. We logged on to Zoom and live streaming, and so we tried to stay out of the mainstream, but it still caught us.
Yeah. I think I heard this, and I don't know if it's true. Well, actually, I think it is true, that this virus, what was the name of the town you said it was possibly linked to the beginning?
Wuhan, China?
Okay. That's also where Zoom was created.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. The company that owns Zoom comes from that same community.
Same.
And I don't think there's anything there to try to link together. I just think it's interesting.
Huh.
All right. So, I'll tell you when I realized that, I realized how aware I was of this type of thing. I was in Walmart one day. And like everybody else, or maybe I'm the only one, I enjoy watching people at Walmart. It's almost as good at the spandex as the Iowa State Fair. And I saw this woman opening coolers, taking things out, looking at it, and then putting it back on the shelf. Or just a shelf inside the store, picking it up, look at the ingredients. I do that all the time. I look at ingredients because of my heart issue now, especially. I got to stay away from sodium. And all of a sudden, I realized all the things that this woman, and I'm not criticizing her at all, but all the things she was touching, if she had been exposed to this, everybody else that picked up that jar, that can, that bottle, was going to be in trouble.
Yeah, that's true. Or if we sneeze, bam, it just goes through the whole environment. You know, one of the things that people aren't talking about, and I have 2 boys that deal with HVAC, and that is in the hospitals that we had to deal with, that I worked in, we had to deal with the potential for viruses or bacteria or anything to be floating around in an operating room. And so there is a whole system of HVAC that you put into an operating room that's way better than anything that we put into our offices or our churches.
And HVAC is just air conditioning.
Air conditioning.
Air moving.
Right. It can be heating or air.
Yeah, okay.
Or air conditioning. And one of the things that's getting very little attention, but I like to see these articles, and when I do, I read them, is that people are calling for our schools, our churches, places where we know that people congregate to change their systems at least enough to accept these HEPA filters that are finer and that will catch some viruses, clean out your ducts, the ductwork, and you know, take a different view of that, because that's where we're probably going to find it most. You talked about going outside and boating and stuff. If we're not in close proximity and there's a little breeze, that's going to carry it away. It's going to be where we congregate inside a building that's going to be the highest risk, I believe.
Okay, now I've got to go back and ask you this question. If the breeze carries it away, doesn't that mean the breeze carries it closer to someone?
It could, but it's like spitting in the ocean, you know.
Okay.
It's
right.
diluted.
Yeah, all right. Okay. The question I want to ask you is, what's the truth about masks? But I don't know if that's an unfair question to ask, because maybe none of us really know. You know, now they're telling us that we need to double up on masks. And yet the governor, and maybe this is all political, she said there's no longer a mandate for masks. We are opening up restaurants in Iowa. We're opening up, I guess movie theaters are coming back on Father's Day weekend, supposedly. A mask isn't going to help me if I'm sitting in a movie theater with somebody, even if I socially distance myself.
Well, the truth about masks are they don't save me from your illness. They can prevent me from spreading anything I might have. So they're not. I don't wear a mask for myself. I wear a mask for my neighbor. Secondly, if I wear that mask too long and, you know, I'm exhaling all the time, that mask gets moist, then at that point that mask is compromised, and genetic material, viruses, anything can pass through it a little more. So I would say, I don't know about doubling masks, but I would say changing them frequently would help. Of course, most of us, even myself, I probably am not infectious. I've had the disease. I probably, we're right at 3 months of immunity, my whole family. But I wear a mask anyway to some degree, just to let people know I take this thing seriously. And I want to do what I can. As I look at it, they may not be 100% effective, but if I do my part and I can ask the Lord to do his part, and I think I stand on good ground when I do that.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm one of those. I guess I have to admit, I'm one of those proud Americans that doesn't want to be told how to do things, and somehow I think I'm Superman inside, that I can prevent myself from getting this. Now, like your dear wife, I have COPD. And then I had this heart thing come up in November. And I had 3 doctors that were on my team, or I was on their patient list or whatever. And they said things that didn't always jive with what the other one said, but they didn't contradict. The one thing they did say was, Mac, if you get this thing, you better write your will. Because between your heart and your COPD and you're 61 years old, that's going to be it. Why don't I take that more serious than the frustration I have because I can't go do what I want to do without being scared to death I'm going to get this thing?
Well, I think we have to, again, I think we do our part, and then we depend on divine power to help us. Whether I get ill and he keeps me, lets me recover, helps me recover, or whether he protects me from getting ill in the first place, I leave that up to him. I'll take my precautions. Do you like seat belts?
No.
I hate seat belts, and I hate masks.
I know.
But I wear seat belts. You know, for a while, the government, and they'll tell you that, yeah, there's laws about seat belts, and I hate the things. I refused to wear seat belts for a long time, and then I was in graduate school, and they said, you need to, for your own practice, I want you to pick something in your life that you have to change. And I thought, okay, I guess I'd better change seat belts, learn to change seat belts. And there's different ways that we change. And so I chose positive reinforcement, and I talked to my son, and I said, every time I get in the car to go to class, would you just remind me to put on my seatbelt?
Yeah.
Because I love you, and out of love, there's positive reinforcement. And so he would tell me a few times, and after a while he forgot, and I'd say, you forgot what to tell me? But I started wearing my seatbelt. I still hate seatbelts. I hate masks. I sat through 2 hours with a mask, and I start getting a headache, and I don't know how our kids are doing this. My grandson goes to school with more than one mask. So this is not fun. It's not. It seems un-American. I am an individual, and I think our individualistic society is part of our problem with this thing proliferating as much as it's been. Back in the 50s, we dealt with polio. I was a kid when I was lining up for a polio vaccine in a sugar cube. Jonas Salk was my hero, you know. And I don't remember whether he made the shot or made the sugar cube, but the guy that made the sugar cube was my double hero.
Uh-huh.
So we haven't really had this kind of a pandemic since polio way back 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago.
I'm ignorant. How did people catch polio? Was it also airborne?
No, but it was more surface
Okay.
borne.
We've never talked about this, but I have the very same story you do about seatbelts. I got my kids to remind me to put them on because they were learning in school you wear your seatbelts. And then I bought a vehicle once that makes a noise if my seatbelt isn't on. Now I wear it all the time.
Yeah.
Dennis Barrett is my guest. He is a healthcare specialist, and we're please believe me when I tell you that his experience in this area is wide and it's deep, and his knowledge is excellent. That's why I wanted him to come in today and to talk about this.
Let me just bring up a little something. I was in healthcare administration for 28 years, and I would have patients come and talk to me concerned about what their physician had prescribed for them, or more likely, because I worked in surgery directly, concerned about a procedure or doing it or not doing it. And so I got used to comparing things to traffic. I compared seatbelts to a mask wearing.
Okay. Oh, all right.
So let me throw out a few things here. I know that our governor is relinquishing the mask mandates, and we're trying to open things up. I'm all for as open an economy as we can have, but we need to realize that Iowa has the 15th highest death rate of any state in the union.
From
COVID.
Okay.
We have 121 deaths per 100,000 people. And so out of 50 states, we're number 15 at the high end or at the low end, whichever you want to say. But we have more deaths than average. We're 12.5% higher than the average number of deaths. I'm not talking infections, I'm talking deaths.
Is this because our population is older?
It could have something to do with the age.
Okay.
It could have a lot to do with how we have responded. But man, this really hit healthcare workers hard in November.
Yeah.
And some into December, and it's likely to do that again. One other thing that I've tracked over time, and that is your chance of dying in an auto accident versus your chance of dying from COVID-19 here in Iowa. And those stats aren't all that hard to find. So today, after you called me, I tried to look those up, and I'm not sure. The traffic accidents aren't hard to find. 335 last year, 335 traffic fatalities in the state of Iowa. The first data I got, I think, for Iowa was to date, and those numbers are about almost 2,000 higher than what I finally settled on. It looks like, from the best I could come up with, it was 3,891 cases. I think KCCI tracked that pretty good during 2020. 3,891 deaths. That being the case, my chances of dying from COVID are 11 times greater in the state of Iowa than my chances from dying in an automobile accident. I hope that kind of puts some things in perspective for most of us, because we all live with the risk of
dying in a car accident.
Well, or being maimed or what have you, or just having a fender bender. So some of us have a COVID case and we're back in circulation in a week or two, and that's kind of the fender bender of this thing. But there are people that are dying from it.
Yeah, and for those of you that are not watching this and just listening, Dennis has a mask on. In fact, I don't think I've seen you without a mask for a year.
That's because you said I looked good, so I put mask on just to keep your...
Yeah, thanks. All right, Jason asked this question. Does this say anything about getting everyone in lockstep in a certain direction for a certain purpose? Obviously, that purpose would be to eliminate COVID or greatly reduce it. What do you, if you had the power, what would the state of Iowa do?
Well, power has its limits, and particularly in America with our independent streak. And most of us had ancestors that came here with a very independent streak, and I have some of those myself. You know, back in the days, let me just step back. Back in the days of polio, nobody told us we had to do these things that I recall. I don't recall, of course, I was 5, 6, I was preschool part of that time. I don't know that there was mandates, but everybody wanted to do it because we saw the iron lungs. We saw the lame kids. We saw what this was doing to people. And if you ever work in a place, if you've ever seen anybody gasping for breath as they are dying, you know, it changes your outlook. It really does. I don't really like government mandates to do things, but I think that this is one of those cases where we could all individually make the decision, I'm not going to be a reservoir for this disease. That's what happened with smallpox in this country. That's what happened with smallpox in the world, and the last case was in Somalia decades ago. It takes all of our cooperation to get this done. Whether the government does it or not, I think we need to use our power to get the message out there to say, you don't want to see your loved one gasping for breath, and I don't want to be the person that passes this on to you. And maybe you just have a fender bender kind of experience, but you pass it on to somebody else, and they pass it on to somebody else, and eventually somewhere in that line somebody dies. I don't want that on my conscience.
Dennis Barrett is my guest today. He is a healthcare specialist, and as you can hear from our conversation, he's not messing around. I'm going to ask this way. When you see someone doing blank, you're very disappointed or even a little angry.
When I'm seeing them doing blank, what?
Well, with COVID, not wearing a mask, not caring about the other people around them, not using sanitizer, not washing their hands. What's the number one thing that you think we ought to focus on? Is it the mask?
Well, I think at this point it's the vaccine.
Okay.
I really think. I mean, masks are a Band-Aid on this thing.
Okay.
It was the best we could come up with given the situation. The real thing is to get a vaccine, in my opinion, because that will help us create immunity across the whole spectrum of this society. And I don't know if you'll stamp out the disease. There are some diseases that have just disappeared. Spanish flu did that way back and then into World War I.
But then we have the common cold, which is a disease
and
that we've never been able to get rid of.
And influenza.
Influenza, yeah.
Yeah, and
flu.
They just keep on and keep on. And what we don't know is corona going to be more like the flu? And it almost seems like that's what it's going to be.
What do we do then?
Well,
I mean, we can't. Should we be a country that wears a mask everywhere? Should there be a governmental punishment or something if you're not wearing a mask?
I don't know that it's been shown to be that effective. I think there would have to be some more research done before anybody would make something like that. Okay. It flies in the face of much of what we believe in America. We don't, we're not going to wear what do they call it, a hijab, or they cover their face and everything in the Middle East.
Yeah.
I don't see us going down that road, but we need to take every precaution that we can. And then as we roll out the vaccines, those are going to help more than anything. There may have to be a series of vaccines. We may have to get vaccinated on an annual or biannual basis if this thing keeps mutating. I don't know.
And that kind of brings us to the point. You believe that we should all get a vaccine.
I think that's the only way to even hope to bring this thing under control.
Okay. What do you say about those reports or those people who have severe after effects? Let me take away the word severe. Who has after effects after getting the vaccine? I don't know if you heard this today, but it's right here in Iowa somewhere. They shut down an entire school district because all the teachers, or a lot of the teachers, got vaccinated, and they all got very sick.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was probably one vaccine, and we've got, 3 of them out there right now?
There's 3 possibilities at the moment.
Okay.
They're still working on more. And I don't know which one that was. That would be good to know, nor do I know. So somebody could have come there that's sick.
Right.
So I worked with a guy years ago that had contracted polio about the time he took a vaccine, and so they assumed that the vaccine had given him polio. And that is possible. So there's risk even in taking vaccine. I don't want to limit. I don't want to overstate this thing. There is a risk with taking vaccine, and how that risk compares to driving down I-235, I don't know yet. Those numbers will come in as we move along. In a way, this crazy thing is that we have a vaccine now within a year. Most vaccines will take 7 or 8 years to develop, to process, to prove that they're safe.
Now, as a healthcare specialist, Does that bother you that we have 3 done within a year, or is that just the greatest thing in the world because that's where we've advanced medically?
Yes and no. I think it's fantastic that we have this much protection coming out at this point. Obviously, they haven't been tested as much as we would like, but given the severity of the situation, given the high number of deaths that this is causing per capita, I think they're well worth the trial to run them out. In a way, we're all just a little bit of a guinea pig here.
Yeah.
But there are no other options to addressing this thing. So if there is a drawback to the vaccine, it is because it has been developed and pushed into production so quickly.
How, this is just me being curious, how can one vaccine be required to be stored at 3,800 below zero or whatever it is? And I believe it's the Johnson & Johnson one. It can be room temperature. How, I don't understand enough about these things, but that just doesn't make any sense to me.
I can't answer that in its entirety. I do know that the Johnson & Johnson uses a DNA strand, a full DNA strand, that they developed that will address the spike on the coronavirus. The other two use a messenger RNA. And are you acquainted with RNA?
No.
So when one cell is trying to make another cell, it unwinds that DNA strand, and there's 2 strands. It's like a rope that's tied, that's rolled
I've
together.
seen the pictures.
Okay, you've seen the pictures. And then there's little segments.
See, Dennis, I'm an expert because I've seen the pictures.
Excellent. And by the way, there's and then alongside that will come little segments of molecules, and they will make a mirror image of that strand, and those are the messenger RNAs. They're just little segments of it, and then they go off, and then they make it. So the other 2, Pfizer and Moderna, are from messenger RNA, and they require the freezing.
Okay.
The DNA strand that Johnson & Johnson's using does not require that kind of storage.
Yeah. So we're almost done with our hour here. I want to give you the last word here. There will be people who are, in this day and age, there will be people who are watching this tonight, and there very well could be people watching this after Corona is gone, looking back to what we said about it and how we handled it. That's one of the things with today's technology. What's your last word on this thing?
Well, as a Christian, I am very well aware that there are a number of Christians who have taken exception to vaccines in general, and I am very well aware of the bogus research that was put out about vaccines. I look at the Bible, and Jesus said, I've come that they might have life and they might have it more abundantly. And I believe that God, in working with man, as he always does, is helping people to understand this disease, is helping them to develop vaccines. God is fighting this disease with us. Not with just himself, but with us. And he's cooperated with these researchers to help us get that. I know that there's some concerns about Johnson & Johnson, because the cell line that they used to develop their vaccine apparently came from an abortion in Europe in 1985. But we serve a Lord who brings good out of evil. There are numerous stories in the Bible, whether it's Joseph or Moses or even Jesus himself dying on the cross, where God brings good out of evil. And if God can bring good out of the evil of an abortion by developing a vaccine, I see his fingerprints all over that. So I don't think that as a Christian, I don't see a reason to have objections to these things. We could go into the research of Andrew Wakefield. It was really sad. It really doesn't qualify as research, but he published papers that said, oh, hey, this vaccines are a bad thing. I would just say, do the best you can and trust in the Lord, and He will help us through this.
Does this vaccine come from sin? Would we have this if there had never been the fall?
We wouldn't have the disease. I think Satan's angry that we got rid of smallpox. It killed a lot of people. It'd still be killing people today if we hadn't developed the vaccine.
Yeah.
Same thing for polio. We were able to stop the diseases in H1N1 and SARS and MERS, and even to some degree in Ebola. And I think the devil brings the disease. God works with humans to fight it. That's how I see it.
Okay. Anybody who's ever listened to me and knows who I am very anti-abortion, but it's not because of my religious beliefs. It's because my biological mother, I'm not going to get into the details, but it had something to do with a back seat in 1958, and I was put into an orphanage. And I found my biological mother when I was 19, and she made it perfectly clear that if Roe versus Wade had been law in 58, as it was in today, she would have had me aborted. So my dislike for abortion is very personal to me. However, and I think you've heard me say this, I think the devil hates abortion because it's one less soul he can corrupt. I believe that life begins in conception. I don't know how anybody can say any different, but that's just me. If that life is there at conception and it's removed from the vessel so it dies, that's one less soul that the devil can corrupt. And I think that really makes him mad.
It could be. I don't know. I see abortion as an evil of its own. Just though we need to put one thing out there, that technically, when we say somebody's had a miscarriage, that in the healthcare profession, that's often referred to as a spontaneous abortion.
Okay.
What I do not know about this abortion that took place in the 80s in Europe was it spontaneous? Was it an abortion of convenience? I don't know. I just know that we serve a God that brings good out of evil every day, regardless of how he chooses to do that. And we need to cooperate with him in that.
Dennis Barrett has been my guest over the last hour. He is a health care specialist, and as you can hear, he's incredibly passionate on what we are all suffering from. This is something that we all have in common.
Yeah.
It's not just affecting men or women or elderly or the young or a color of our skin. This seems like an enemy that attacks anyone and everyone. And maybe we'll look back someday and say, boy, if we just would have worn the masks for a year, or they'll look back and say, we should have had a massive inoculation. Is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
Where you the government required you to get the vaccine, excuse me. I don't know what that'll be. But like you, I love Jesus. And I know God is an almighty God, and he's in charge of everything, and he does make good out of what man screws up. And I can't wait to see what he does with this one.
One more quick point. I can get the vaccine for myself, but I might also get it for my neighbor. God called me to be my neighbor's keeper, my brother's keeper. I had an experience with this, and I didn't like influenza vaccines at all, and I would kind of skip them at work if I had the chance. And rarely did I get the disease. But one summer, there was influenza going around. I think it was 17, maybe it was 18. And there was no vaccine for it, but I took it home. I was sick. I was very sick. And I gave it to my wife, and she nearly died. And after that, I thought, I'm not getting this vaccine for myself. I'm getting it for her.
Yeah.
I'm getting it for someone I love. And I think that is also a motive that we can have to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead with this. Yeah, it might not bother me too much, but it might bother somebody else. It might cost them their life.
Thanks for coming in, Dennis. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, and that will do it for today's Max World Live, Living Free Through Forgiveness. As I've told you over the last couple of weeks, I have an excellent employer. By the way, this is the first time I've had a boss other than me since 1983. And I work for some stupendous people who have now adjusted my working schedule so I can be with you every afternoon at 1 o'clock. The only time I won't be with you is on Thursdays because we have a live, literally ocean to ocean border, no borders actually, of people who love Jesus, and it's a helpline for prayer, and it's live, and it originates here on this station. So nothing I have to tell you or say to you is as important as encouraging people to pray. And so I would ask you to pray. Pray for Dennis, pray for his wife, pray for your family, pray for me, pray for Mr. Biden, please, and Kim Reynolds. Pray for those people who God has put in power. Because if you read Romans 13, Paul makes it clear, whether you like Joe Biden or not, or will like Donald Trump or not, God put him there. And we're supposed to follow our leaders as long as they're doing God's will. And that's what I hope you pray for. The other thing is, I always try to say at the end of the program, you're holding a resentment against somebody. Maybe it's me after this show, I don't know, but I know you have one. We all have one. It's the whispers that the devil is in our ear going, oh, you're better than that. You don't have to deal with that. Or, oh, go ahead and have an affair. No big deal. It won't hurt your family. You carry that resentment, and there's only one thing that can take it away, and that's Jesus dying on the cross and his blood splattered all over you. So forgive, please, whoever it is you're holding a resentment against. I will appreciate it, and God will appreciate it. Amen?
Amen.